Well, good morning. I'm Ted Chandler, and it is my honor and my privilege to serve as co-chair of RVA757 Connects. Together with my other co-chair, Tom France, we really do appreciate all of you engaging today and participating today. It means a lot to us. I know there are a lot of things that you could be doing. So this first slide is our momentum slide. It also kind of shows our history from when we formed the 501c3 organization, on whose meeting this is, back in 2020. So we're really just a few years into this. And what you should gain from this is that every year we take on more and we accomplish more. So we're really pleased with the momentum that we have now going into 2024. It's appropriate in the first meeting of 2024 to take a quick look back at 2023, a really big year for us, really huge. We were able to come in and demonstrate that our advocacy, our research-based advocacy on the I-64 gap could be impactful at the General Assembly. So we're very pleased to come in and show that this organization can not just start initiatives, but help finish them. That funding is now completely in place. And of course, the Global Internet Hub, which really is such a massive idea and a massive opportunity for the I-64 Innovation Corridor. So a lot of accomplishments, and we look back at that. John's going to touch on a few, really just informing the fact that what we're doing works, and then we'll quickly turn our attention to 2024. We appreciate the performance recognition. John does this kind of for a living. SIR does. Says it's extremely unusual to have such a high rating on overall performance of an organization. So we appreciate that report card from our board and also our partners. And again, we celebrate that for just a moment, and then we get back to work earning it again for 2024. But thank you for that. 2024 is going to be a big year. These are our initiatives for the upcoming year. I really commend to you the document that Greg sent out that describes these priorities in more detail, but also talks about how we come to these priorities. This is not a top-down kind of organization. We have a lot of collaboration, and there are a lot of opportunities for both inclusivity and also for the brains of the organizations, the brains of our leaders to come up with this. So take a look at how we come to these. Particularly item 2 and item 3, taking on key targeted industry clusters. It's a perfect fit for what we do, which is really start with research. Where can we be most impactful? Where is there already work on the ground through our MIC representatives and governmental representatives? And then how can we help? And workforce development's obviously one of the most important things in our region. There are a lot of disconnected type of activities going on with respect to that. And we hope to make an impact there in bringing context and bringing a bright light to shine on the areas of excellence in that area. You make this possible. We're a 501c3. Our funding comes from you, from community leaders that believe in what we're doing. We really appreciate it when you make 3-year commitments in your funding, because that gives us line of sight. The work that we do is multi-year. We'll never get out over our sleeves, over our skis. But where we have visibility into funding into 25 and 26, we can certainly go faster. But thank you.
And thank individuals too. So.
Yeah, and individuals, everyone that is contributing to this. And then thanks to our executive committee and thanks to John and Greg. We've got a small team and we work so closely together, collaborative together. And obviously with this big board, what we do is do all the hard work down in the trenches, and then we can make these meetings and your impact more effective by being higher level. So really appreciate the work of this executive committee and of course, John and Greg.
Right.
So I think with that, I will turn this over to
Great.
John, President and CEO.
Thanks.
Go for it.
Thanks, Ted. So we're going to cover 4 topics today, or 3 main ones. Update on what we've been doing, and then going to go into PCs for People, which is an initiative that's related to the Global Internet Hub, but I think something really exciting that we want to make sure you're aware of before it comes to market. And then our generative topic is going to be on legislative matters, and we've got Dr. Holsworth and Ross Grogg and Chris Lloyd, and that's the second half of the meeting, and it's just about as inside as you can get in terms of understanding the General Assembly from these 3 gentlemen. So really looking forward to that part of the meeting. And then Tom will wrap it up with a close. So an update, I'm going to really reinforce for you guys our transparency and how you can stay up to date on our materials. And then Ted asked me to put a quick look back at 2023. So I'm going to just go through that in just 1 minute, and you guys time me on it. But then our priorities for 2024, this is really important. All of us are on so many boards and do so many things. It's a challenge to remember every detail, but I want you to remember what we're working on from 30,000 feet, and not only what we're doing, but why we're doing it. So I'm going to take us through that, and then we'll get a quick update on some of our activities, and then get into an open discussion for y'all to give feedback to how we're working and how we could be even more effective with your talent and your generosity. So transparency and board policies. I want you to realize at the bottom of the website homepage is documents, and we spend a lot of time keeping that clean and updated. So even for this meeting, there's a folder with all the materials. There's a financial folder, there's founding documents folder. So just know you can always go there, and we update it constantly. And after every meeting, we're putting things in there, even after every EC meeting. So just as an example, at the end of the year, we put our financials and shots of QuickBooks up there for our overall look of 2023. And then our budget to show where we are tracking on our operational budget and grants budget. So we are really following best practices and trying to be transparent. We have purchased O&D insurance like we do every year. That policy's even in one of the folders. So you can look at it, but I just want you to know that it's all there, it's all transparent, and anything that you guys please call us if there are any ways to improve this. But we want this to be as transparent as possible, not only to their directors and the mic, but to everybody that's looking at us. There are no secrets here. There's only opportunities to move our regions forward. One really big document is our 990s. Every year we have to do this. And so we've gotten it already finalized, or the first draft done, and PBM Mayors is our accounting firm, and they've done a great job with us, and they really look over all of our financials, all of our QuickBooks. Every month we have a meeting and they double check everything, and they've sent us the Form 990 filled out. The EC meeting is in March 13th. We're going to look at it and approve it by that date, and then we're going to place it in the board portal, and you're going to get it in the board packet for the April 23rd meeting, and it's due to the feds by May 15th. So an important, very public document that I know people that research nonprofits like to get their hands on. So we take this very seriously. A quick look back at 2023. Mission accomplished. I-64 gap funding and construction started, fully funded. It's going to take 4 years, but we're going to get it done. Global Internet Hub plan got created. Now we're moving from planning to implementation. Convergence, thank you, Brian Stevens and Brian Anderson and y'all's great staffs. We had put on a record attendance this past year. We're looking forward to Convergence next year. Growing partnerships. I think we've really gotten off to a great start with Jason, the president and CEO of VEDP. Really want to make it a standing event to have him come and be one of the discussion points at one of our meetings, along with the regional economic development leaders. Engagement with rail planning and partners, and Jim Spores, one of our directors and EC members, and his leadership with our rail committee. And now we're meeting on a regular basis with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and HRTPO, and the Crater Planning District in Petersburg, and then Plan RVA for the Richmond region, and RVA Connects. And we're meeting with DRPT and Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. And really being involved in the 5-year planning process. And number 6, we got the document out. Really was the folks, Virginians for High-Speed Rail, but we were part of this, and it's a great document that's being circulated in the General Assembly right now. And then we supported important initiatives. The Jeff Lab win, there were many, many supporters on that. We were delighted to write letters, and really huge, huge economic win for not only Hampton Roads, but for the Richmond region as well, and all of Virginia. And then Springfield, Franconia rail bypass, we spent time with the Passenger Rail Authority and wrote support letters for that. And then we launched a new website, and we've really gotten some traction with innovation spotlights. I tell you, it's fascinating. About, easily 100 people watch it every time, but then another 100 or so watch it as a rerun, as a video, and they maybe can't make the actual live one. But we're getting great feedback on it, and more people want to be on it. And we seem to get media coverage right after each one on the story, so it really leverages it. But this, kudos to Greg Gilligan for many things, but for this in particular, he's really done a great job leading this effort. And we've got a lot of earned media, which is terrific. Yes, kind of shameless, but it's good. It just reinforces our messaging. And we've really developed more connections. We got 3,500 people in our database and people following us. So that's the quick look back. Looking forward, 2024. So what are we doing and why? And I'd encourage you guys to, if you could at this point, put your speakers on mute, because I'm picking up some background noise. So I'll say it one more time. Try to put your speakers on mute. Thank you. All right. Our purpose is something we got to start with always, and it's about economic success and quality of life in our 2 regions. And the way we do it is we identify things that we should support and advance, and try to move them along faster than they're moving along now, or bring them up to everybody's attention to say this needs to be a priority added to what everybody's working on. It's too important. It might have been left out. So that's how we work. This is our why and our how. And we've sent a detailed document as part of the meeting package. This is all of our priorities and how we go about it. So I'd encourage you to read this. And we simplified it. It's really the way we do this every year is the EC collects possible priorities in the late fall. Then at the end of the year, you remember the meeting we had at the end of last year, and we had a great discussion, and workforce really came out on top of that discussion. We need to do everything we can in that area. And then we had the board mic survey, and we asked you to actually rank and rate different priorities. And then the EC reviewed all of that and then sets the priorities based on all this input in this process. So here they are. Global Internet Hub, #1. And that was the #1 thing we heard in the research feedback. This is the most important thing we can be working on. Targeted industry clusters, and you see those 4 listed there. Workforce development across everything. Find a way that we can be part of helping the ecosystem move along. There are a lot of talented organizations in that ecosystem. Passenger rail, continue to work with DRPT and Virginia Passenger Rail and Authority and Virginians for High-Speed Rail. And again, a lot of that focus is making sure that Long Bridge really gets constructed. And then multi-use trails. So these are the 5 that we have. And I want to get into the why here. And this is some new material that you might have seen in the past, but it's really important to understand why these 5 are the 5 that we have, and actually how some of them are really interconnected. One of the founding documents we have, this picture's on the left, it's really was a Go Virginia funded study, which is really our strategic plan. So if you don't have a copy of this, we have plenty of extra copies. We can mail you one or email you one. You can get it off our website, but it has these strategies in it that we identified these 4 growth clusters. We're advancing digital and physical infrastructure connections. We're growing and retaining talent, showcasing greater collaboration and innovation, supporting our economic development partners, and keeping everybody informed. So I just would encourage you as a board director or as a MIC member, please read this study and understand it really is our strategic plan. And it boils down to 3 things: jobs, talent, and infrastructure. And that's creating 21st century jobs, growing, attracting, and retaining talent, and providing connections and infrastructure support. And there are so many organizations involved in all 3 of these, and we have to be, because frankly, we are behind. When you look at our GDP growth compared to the 11 jurisdictions we compete against, and I say our Richmond and Hampton Roads, we just don't have a winning story to tell. We've got a lot going on. I feel like we're getting a lot of momentum, but we've got to go faster. And so we got to go faster in these three things in particular. And with jobs, creating 21st century jobs, this document really profiles the location quotient and where we have an advantage and where we can grow the new jobs of tomorrow, where we will have an advantage over other jurisdictions. You're already starting to see some of this. Cybersecurity has got the best story ever. Our LQ is second just to Washington, D.C. in the whole country. And so we got to really lean into that. And the logistics and transportation, I mean, our port authority is second to none. Unbelievable story happening around our marine terminal here in Richmond with transportation and logistics. So another really growing category. And then data and data analytics, pharma and life sciences. I mean, we both know the story of what's happening in Petersburg with Flow and Civica and what's happening with LifeNet down in Virginia Beach. So it's a huge story and one that we've got to package and sell and support. So this is just really important. These are the new job generating industries of tomorrow. And they have two things in common, a robust digital infrastructure and tech talent. We are growing data exponentially, and it's not just humans doing it, it's the machines that are doing it, and just wait till autonomous vehicles come. So we got to have somewhere to store this data. And what the latest perspective on this is you've got to have a great digital infrastructure hub as a jurisdiction or as a mega region. And it's made up of all of these things. It's not just data centers. You got to have reliable power, and thank goodness we have Dominion Energy here. And you got to have a robust terrestrial network that's almost the blood vessels. It's the network that all the data moves around on. And you can accelerate that and facilitate it with a fiber network ring. And then you can connect the networks with internet exchange points and then connect to other cities with trunk lines and even connect across the planet through subsea cables. So this is just a snapshot to say it's not just data centers. It's really a digital infrastructure ecosystem. And really, I think the winning regions of tomorrow are going to be investing in having a state-of-the-art ecosystem. And in fact, we know from our own research and doing the strategic plan for the Global Internet Hub, when you look at the mature digital infrastructure MSAs, Denver, Dallas, Atlanta, Portland, you see that 10-year tech job growth. That's the annual growth. And you see how high the salaries are for IT tech workers. But look at that 10-year worker productivity growth and look at GDP growth. So those mature digital infrastructures, and I know there are other variables out there, but when you just look at this correlation, maybe not causation, you start to get this picture to go, oh my gosh, those mature infrastructure SMAs have an advantage. And then look at our 11 jurisdictions we compete against. And this list came from the economic development agencies, but look at their 10-year tech growth rate on average and their 10-year worker productivity growth and their 10-year GDP growth. And then look at the US average. And then the unfortunate story is we are behind that combined region, I-64, but also Richmond and Virginia Beach MSA separately. And so we need more tech workers, and tech workers are attracted to places that have sophisticated digital infrastructures and tech-oriented companies. And so this is going to be, I believe, the new economic development model. And this is looking at this data through Jobs EQ, which is one big data source. Another one is Lightcast. These are the two main economic data sources that economists use across the world when they're looking at the United States data. And looking the same lens, the same equation holds up in terms of that tech job growth rate, and then something that we look at in terms of being competitive and whether you have a positive numbers associated with that or negative. And you've got to be ahead of a major industry occupation like tech and IT and tech talent. And so every way we looked at this, it came back to we've got to invest in this global internet hub and be second to none. So that's what we have is the plan. I hope everybody's looked at the map. In fact, I hope everybody has it up on their wall. And we know now some of the economic development agencies actually have been calling us for a second round of copies. And I walk in Henrico's Economic Development Agency, see it up on the wall, and just would encourage you guys to really spend time with this. It's a great executive summary of the plan. But the second one, we got to work on those jobs and that digital infrastructure, but the talent is critical. And we have to grow, attract, and retain talent. And what we mean here, in particular, if our number one job is to grow the digital infrastructure, we got to make sure we have the talent today and tomorrow. And work with our workforce talent pipeline partners, the Hampton Roads Workforce Council and Capital Region Workforce Partnership, and in the colleges and universities, that includes community colleges. And I really kudos to many of the academic leaders, ODU and William and Mary, VCU, have all set up data schools. And we got to just keep going and make sure that everybody in the talent pipeline understands the global internet hub and the jobs that are needed to be filled today and tomorrow. So we look at this as really a long-term proposition. And our role in it is to be that convener and to point out where there's opportunity to satisfy maybe unmet need or demand. And this is so important because we're going to have a workforce shortage. Everybody goes, yeah, AI is going to take care of this problem. No, it's not. It's just going to make us all more productive. There might be some jobs eliminated, but not in mass. We didn't have a mass elimination of jobs with the internet. It just moved us all up in terms of greater productivity. So it really is a productivity tool, AI. But this talent issue is a demographic issue. And demographics is destiny. Ever since the dawn of man, there have been more younger people than older people. It's always been that way. But because of great research from schools like VCU Health and health sciences at universities all across the world, we're living a lot longer. So this is a big, huge trend coupled with the fact that we're not having as many babies. Our birth rate is below the replacement rate at 1.6. So when you start putting these two together, what you have is a shift in the population pyramid. This is in 1960, and it's when boomers were really young, age 0 to 14, men on the left, women on the right. But when you project this out to 2030, it shifts to a population rectangle. And so overlaying these, what you've got are people that aren't being born in the gray bars. And so that's significant. In fact, think about Toys R Us. It's out of business because there were a lot of babies that weren't born over the last 10 years. So this has profound implications when you think about the future. Don't think about a population pyramid, think about an Empire State Building. There are going to be just as many people over 65 as under 18. And that means our workforce, there's going to be relatively fewer younger people and relatively more older people. So there's going to be a war for talent. So our workforce has grown over the last decade by about 5%. But when you think about that growth, it's really come from the 55 plus. This is just right out of demographics. We're not seeing a growth in that younger workforce. And when you look out into the future, over the next decade, what you start to see is actually a decrease in that younger age segment. So the 55 plus, yes, that's growing, but we're going to really have to fight it out for talent. And when you say, oh yeah, well, they'll just move here. Well, our mover rate is at an all-time low. Well, only 8% of us in America move any given year. And when you look at that moving, most of it is within a county or across a county within a jurisdiction. It's only 2% that move across state lines. And who are those movers? Well, it's those young people. It's the Gen Zs and the youngest of the millennials. And then once you get to be around 40 years old, you settle down and you stay put. And that's the way it is. So, wow, that's our opportunity. If we want to attract people, we got to know what do they want in a place. And our research that we've done as SIR in helping cities attract young people, you got to do the basics. And this is what young people in Raleigh want, and DC, and Charlotte, and Austin, and Atlanta. They want the basics. Safe. It's got to be safe. It's got to have employment options, and it's got to have quality and affordable housing. So that soap gets you clean. But what you need to realize that you can influence the placemaking factors, and offering outdoor recreation and a great food scene are universal across every city and what young people want. So that leads me to trails. And why are we as a top 5 into multi-use trails? Well, just go to Bentonville. Their number one driver is trail development, number one driver of talent attraction. And they, through the Walton Foundation, have just turned their whole metropolis into Trail City and all kinds of trails. And young people are flocking there. And so you don't look at multi-use trails just as entertainment. You should look at it as talent attraction and retention. And when we look across the country, we're seeing trails exploding in city after city, as well as across our country. They're linking trails, the east to west and north to south. And so we need to be part of this network, and we need to be a place that people want to come and ride, experience what we're like, and want to stay and be part of us and keep the people that we have here. So our strategy, we're seeing all the attention in Virginia going to the Shenandoah Trail and to the Fall Line Trail and Eastern Shore Trail. We've got to get the extension of the Capitol Trail from Williamsburg to Virginia Beach. It's called the Birthplace of America Trail. We got to get that in this discussion of the big four, and we got to keep advancing the big three that are in our mega region. So we got to help the Fall Line Trail folks. We got to do the work on the Capitol Trail expansion and then the Eastern Shore Trail, because it's economic development. And then the last one is really the no-brainer. It's just connecting us. It's the infrastructure. And, you know, we got to be more connected with roads. And so we got to be the driveway for our port system to the rest of America. We've got to really lean in on trails and build momentum there, and then rail and make this happen, even though it's the longer term of all of our work. So I hope that gives you a good sense of our why. These are all interconnected. They're all important, and we're trying to find always our place where we can complement what's going on by convening and collaborating and using our talents to be part of the team that moves it all forward. So an update on our committees. Again, there's a detailed document in the board packet. It's called meeting document number 4. And it really details the work that's been done and being advanced by the executive committee and our committees. In the interest of time, I'm just going to give you some quick headlines. The Governance and Nominations Committee, we really think it's time, now that the EC has fallen into meeting 7 times a year, that we should really look at that EC composition and see if there are any other people that want to become that active, but also are we really representative of all the voices that we have in our larger board. So that's some work that is taking place with Sarah Jane Kirkland and Moses Foster. And then the Development Committee, Mitch leads this, Mitch Haddon, and we just got to make sure we send out the invoices now for next year or for this year, and then also talk to folks that have ended their 3-year cycle to re-up for another 3 years to really keep our momentum going, and maybe even explore some other funding options related to the Global Internet Hub. And then we're starting 2 new committees. One's a communications committee, and this is really going to stand up, and a speakers bureau. And I know a couple of you guys have raised your hand. You want to be on it. So this is Greg's going to lead this and just build on the great work that he's already started. And then the last one's an audit committee. The EC has kind of served as the audit committee de facto. We're going to really now have a separate one that'll do the reporting at board meetings and look at all of our major financial statements and our 990 form, et cetera. So this is where we're headed for this year. And if you have any interest in serving on these committees, please let us know. You know, there's work that's going on every day to keep our enterprise moving forward. And then lastly, sort of an update on our initiatives. And again, there's another document that goes into great detail about this. The Global Internet Hub is our #1 strategy. I hope you've heard me say that 3 times already. So we're focused on this, and a number of you guys are coming in and helping us. We have started a Global Internet Hub Council, which is a subset of our board. It is a committee of RVA757 Connects, at least today. And the members on that committee, some are directors and some are Mike members and some are outside folks, but they have all chipped in with money to help us have a little bit of a war chest to advance our 10 strategies that are in the Global Internet Hub plan. And this is the document we use at each meeting. It's also on the portal. And we go through one strategy at a time. Where are we? What's the next step? How can we get going? So I have this incredible think tank, really intellectual firepower and financial resources to some extent to really help drive this plan. And our goal is really to start showing some traction that we can really deliver on our value proposition, that we not only put this plan together, but we're advancing the development of our global internet hub ecosystem here. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to go in front of the House Communications Technology and Innovation Committee, and they asked about jobs and were jobs associated with it. So I took them through those, the numbers I just shared with you guys about how technology, IT, and tech jobs are tied to the GDP growth and productivity per worker growth. So we've got the evidence. We just need to get more and more people behind us and listen carefully. We need to be so vocal right now that this current debate that's taking place on the Capitol right now by both sides, and legislation being put up to limit data centers or to put more constraints on their growth. And so our position on this is that data centers are part of a bigger story. It's about the digital ecosystem. That chart I took you through with all those points on that map. We have to be the place that keeps growing our digital infrastructure. We have to attract IT tech workers. We have to be the place that businesses want to locate, which in turn delivers that advantage in GDP growth. And so making sure people understand this isn't a data center discussion. This is really an ecosystem, digital infrastructure ecosystem discussion. And Virginia has an advantage now, and we've got to maintain that advantage. People are going to do everything they can to catch us. So we were pleased when this article came out right after our talk. House Committee looks beyond data centers to Virginia's high-tech future. I couldn't have written this headline better, but we want this to be on every newspaper and in every newscast for people to get this, and we invest in this. And I'll tell you a quick side story. I was speaking in Myrtle Beach at the beginning of December, and before I was introduced as a keynote speaker to 500 transportation leaders across the country, the head of the Economic Development Agency, or the Chamber of Commerce, rather, of Myrtle Beach, introduced Myrtle Beach to all the attendees and said, you came here because we're a great place, a great resort, but you really are going to get to know Myrtle Beach in the future as a major international global digital internet hub. My jaw just dropped. I'm like, oh my gosh. And she waxes on into explaining all about this. So there's competition out there, and it's right next door. So we got to keep going. And speaking of keep going, one of the priorities is the multi-use trail. And we were talking with Bob Crum and his staff. We were invited to a board meeting of the Tidewater Trails Alliance. So we went in there and really shared with them some perspective that we have on their work on the trail. And they work closely with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and the folks that Bob leads. And we just were really bold and said, look, if you guys want to get going, we've got to get more businesses involved. And we got to think about your name. So we gave them all these ideas. And in particular, we said, you might not have full appreciation of this, but the name BOAT, which stands for Birthplace of America Trail, is not going to work long-term. People are going to say, where's the boat? And so where is that water vehicle? So we prevailed, and they want us to help them finalize another name. So we're gonna work on that with them. But we think we can give them a little juice to get going faster and provide support in that. So we're really pleased at where that is. And by the way, we've got the Virginia Capitol Trail excited. And so they're going to be part of meetings going forward too, because we got to link these two somehow. So we'll have the longest trail in Virginia, which gives us a great position. So I'm going to stop there. I've been rambling, but I want to see feedback from you guys. Any input would be really helpful before we move into the next topic. Yes, Peggy.
Your step ladder, talking about the positions and the jobs, and it starts with K-12, community college. Somewhere it's actually, I will say, a trickle down. For every PhD, you will have, let's just say, 3 master's level, and for every 3 master's level, you will need 5 baccalaureates. And
Yeah.
for every baccalaureate, you will need X number of community college, and then down into the K-12. But the other part of, as far as community college, is not only do we support that ladder going up, we are also supporting the communities and the support services around, the HVAC technicians, the healthcare technicians, all of that. And so, you know, it really gets to be a huge picture of where of the jobs that are needed to support that step ladder.
Yes.
Is not just a 1-to-1 to 1-to-1.
That's a great.
And from the community college perspective, our target audience to attract community colleges is 3.2 million Virginia adults that have some or no postgraduate or post high school credential. So we have people there. 81% of the community college graduates or certificate people stay in Virginia. So we have an opportunity for the pipeline. We have, and K-12 with dual enrollment, you know, we can support that going up, but it is not a 1-for-1 going up the step ladder.
Great point. We hope you guys can see your fingerprints on our priorities, right? This is a group run by consensus.
John, do we have any intel? This is Greg Garrett. Do we have any intel on, or are we doing research on what Myrtle Beach is doing right or wrong relative to becoming a direct competitor of us as the next global internet hub?
Well, I can tell you the reaction to people really in the know, like Vinay Nagpal, who's now helping the Global Internet Hub Council, and then some other really informed members. They said Myrtle Beach doesn't have 1/10 of the assets we have in digital infrastructure. So they're just putting lipstick on a pig. You know, their talk is way ahead of their what they can deliver. But I just again, I was just couldn't even believe it. I was like, oh my God, they're just talking about our playbook. But it just says to me, we just got to keep going faster, right? Because there are other cities around the world. I mean, there are going to be 10 to 12 subsea cables in the next 10 years, new ones on the Eastern Seaboard. We got to get our share of 2 or 3 of those, right? To complement the 3 we have. Shaman, you know this better than anybody, that nobody sleeps with technology. It jumps up a whole nother generation every week almost. So.
No, I love your comment on the AI. You know, I think AI obviously will make us efficient. However, I think AI is also going to create a lot of jobs. And these are the highly paid, very specialized skills. More, you know, AI runs on data. So if we build good data engineers, data scientists, AI engineers, I think that's going to help us. I mean, that's really even more need for us to have those highly skilled talent in the right kind of job categories. So I love that comment you made.
Good.
That AI is not going to reduce work, it's actually going to create work for people.
And I would say, Dr. Hemphill, you really have invested in that new data sciences center that's at Virginia Beach, and you know Dr. Rao's doing the same at William and Mary. I mean, you guys are going all in, which is great.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, and it's certainly going well with since we've opened it, and just pretty pleased with the progress. And so now we're in the midst of a hiring cluster of a faculty, about 6 faculty lines that we've placed in data science, and mostly researchers that will also have some capacity to teach. But we're truly just trying to lean into business in this particular region and beyond, and looking furthermore how we're partnering with Jefferson Lab as well. And so a lot of great work going on in that space, that's for certain.
Great. Peggy?
The other thing I think that that industry can be helpful with is that, you know, there are jobs that are going to be needed. We don't even know what they are yet. And so we need to really be thinking way ahead of where we need to go, especially in the IT, in the data field, so that, you know, we can prepare our K-12 students that and get them engaged so that, but you know, we don't have a clue in many respects as to what's coming down the road. What do we need to look at?
And that's what I hope we can do as RVA757 Connects. I hope we can use our future lens and work with Nancy and some of the studies that she's invested in and really try to paint that picture for everybody. You know, we don't offer content or teach, I mean, but what we try to do is help with research, see the future maybe a little bit clearer than others, and then share that with our partners.
John, Greg Garrett again. I have a new role as the chair of Future Hampton Roads. And while it is only really about Hampton Roads and not about the mega region, under my leadership, it will also be about the mega region.
Yeah.
And one of our roles is, or one of our goals, one of our objectives is to highlight collaborative efforts. So I'm speaking to really everybody in this Zoom room right now, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 universities doing something together, several cities doing something together, the mega region doing something together. Anything that we're doing together, we would consider publishing an article in our new publication called Future Thinking. Excuse me, Forward Thinking, called Forward Thinking. So any effort that any of you are doing, if it is a collaborative effort outside of your boundaries, outside of your borders, please tell us about it. Send me something about it, and we would look at publishing that.
Well, terrific. Well, listen, you guys don't hesitate to email us or call us. You know, this is your organization. So we really wanted to spend this time today at our kickoff meeting of the year to say, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing. And so help make sure that we are as effective as possible. So John Reinhardt.
John, good morning. This is Neka. I had my hand raised, but I don't think you saw.
Okay.
Neka Chiazor with Cox Communications. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in, and I'm losing my voice, so please pardon me. I'm super jazzed and stoked that we are prioritizing the global internet hub. I can tell you that wholeheartedly, working for a technology company. We lose not just talent, but we lose opportunities to Myrtle Beach and Charlotte all the time because of their positioning. And so anything that you think we can do at Cox to support this effort, we are all in. I think, as you know, and you and I have talked about this at length, several other cities around the world that have anchored themselves as global internet hubs have seen massive economic growth. So I see this as a great opportunity for our mega region, and definitely happy to support the cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. And I'm really, we took a tour of Cox's facilities and we're so impressed. You guys are like the tip of the arrow in our region on a lot of this, which is great. How about John Reinhardt?
Hi, everybody. John, a couple quick things. I'm really pleased to see that we're moving on the priorities and everything that we just talked about, and the Global Internet Hub is it. Couple thoughts though. We talk about the rail initiatives. Are we clear enough in that? Because we're really focusing on passenger rail, you know, because people may say, well, wait, we don't need any more freight rail. It's just a minor thing. I don't know if we're messaging properly that we're trying to move people as efficiently as we currently are moving freight. Second point, the dredging has gone really well. I think Barb's on this call. I'm not active in the port anymore, but you have two-way traffic going on now with 14,000 plus TEU ships passing each other, coming in and out of this port. That is huge. The other ports don't have that. And that's your accessibility. That's, you know, that's moving the infrastructure along, and that's there now. And that might be something to focus on because it really is a big success story. It saves a lot of money and makes the supply chain work efficiently. So, but looking forward to a great 22.
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe it's a blind spot on our part. We really should be given equal weight to that and really understanding the information behind it as we talk to DRPT. And Barb, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, John, thanks for raising those points. It's always great to see you. And with regard to the passenger and freight rail conversation, there is a we have rockin' freight results coming out of the port, reaching our mid-American markets. But one of the efforts that we are working with DRPT on that will benefit both freight and passenger rail is rail crossings, rail and grade crossing separations and eliminations. And it's a big priority because it improves the efficiency and the opportunity associated with the rail that exists today without adding while you work to expand additional lines and capacity on the rail. So we would be happy to share more information on that effort that we're working with DRPT on. There's several communities in the Hampton Roads area that we are working with them on various grants so that to address those concerns within their community. Our interest is the opportunity to move freight faster through their communities and more safely. And to John's point about the celebration with the two-way traffic, it has been, as he knows, a long time coming. And it is definitely something to be celebrated. And I think we will have in the coming week or two some video footage that really highlights and shows it well. So happy to share that information as well.
That's great. All right, well, on the
Hey, John, can I jump in just quickly on John's
Jim.
point
Yes.
about freight rail? A lot of the efforts of VPRA is to deconflict passenger and freight rail. Most of our investment, Long Bridge included, is to get additional capacity and to get freight on freight lines and get passengers on passenger lines.
Okay, that's a great point. And Jim, thank you for all your help and guidance on that rail committee. All right, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and go to the next part of the discussion. Okay, so PCs for people. Now I'm going to ask Nika and Bernard Robinson and Brian to provide some support in this, but I wanted to share with you an opportunity that we have, and it really reflects the strength that we bring to the table as two regions. We couldn't do this without being partners, Richmond and Hampton Roads. But in our very first meeting, we were all gathering to ultimately do this strategic plan for the Global Internet Hub, and we had 8 meetings to go. But in that very first meeting, Dr. Lucas from the Virginia Union University stood up at the meeting and said, "Why does the world need another global internet hub?" And we all looked at him and said, "Oh my God, what a question." We said, let's think about that. And he really was asking the question, do we want to just, create a pipeline that just goes right through Virginia and out of Virginia? Or do we want to just let, the rich get richer? Or, what are we really trying to do? Is this an opportunity for us to think differently? And so what a great charge to our committee. And as we worked through it, we were looking for opportunities, and one we just literally walked into. So Brian Anderson and his group at the Chamber put on a wonderful intercity visit to Kansas City. And as all you guys that have been on Chamber trips, you go on different tracks after the general session. So when you get on buses and you pick the category you like. And so Bernard and Brian and myself happened to pick a track that was called PCs for People that the Chamber had set up. And we just walked into this facility and met the gentleman behind this incredible organization that's in 10 different cities doing some amazing work. They have for 10 years put in place at scale a way to pick up old computers from businesses and organizations, take them to a centralized secure spot and refurbish them, upgrade them, and take and handle and recycle the parts that they're not using and not throw them into a dump. And then to get computers in the hands of underserved people, and then to not stop there, but train people in YMCA locations how to use computers and then get their homes wired. So it's a really successful refurbisher organization. And we walked away from there saying, oh my gosh, this is really exciting. I wonder if they're interested in expanding. This could really benefit us back home. And so we did just that. We called them, Bernard and Brian Anderson and myself, and we talked to the guys that run PCs for People, and they said, yeah, we want to come to, 8 more locations and do this and bring our model that works. And we're like, well, tell us about your results. And their results are really incredible, especially this last one, that the households that they help in the first year, their household income goes up by 15%. So that's upward mobility right there. They're being empowered by having the power of technology in their homes and being able to search for better employment opportunities and such. And the way it operates, the businesses donate computers, and PCs for People have a couple of trucks in each market, and they go around and pick up the computers, wipe the hard drives, refurbish them, and then provide that. They kind of do a wallet biopsy on people and to see what kind of price, if you're really way below poverty level, that's not much. Maybe you're right at poverty level, it might be a modest fee. But then they provide the training and low cost of free internet service, and they don't put anything in a landfill. So we were just so impressed with them. And they said to come to a new market, they need $800,000 in startup to where they get to be self-sufficient. And that startup money is to rent a warehouse and to hire people and to get a couple of trucks and to really follow their business plan. And their break-even point's about 2.5 years. So that's what they shared with us. And they said it just works. And their model, they can import it anywhere, and it comes with the playbook. They run it. They hire people, they run it. They're not looking to have a group become expert on refurbishing. They just bring their franchise to town and get going. They have sales materials. They know what kind of space they want. So it's relatively simple. And if there is a refurbisher that's a niche refurbisher in town, like in Richmond, there's one called Tech for Troops. They actually will work with them and tell companies, if you're supporting Tech for Troops, we don't want your computers to take away from them. We want to get your extra ones. And then they'll work with people, and we actually met with Tech for Troops that we'll do the refurbishing. We'll pick up the computers, refurbish them, and give them to you, so you can just work on distributing computers to your niche. So it feels like a win-win-win every question that we asked, and we got really excited about it. And here's where it got really interesting. When you look at the current locations that they're in, notice how big the populations are. Their business model requires 2 million people. And they were saying, guys, I'm not sure Richmond is big enough. And that's when Brian Anderson said, John, do you want to tell them or me? And I said, we're really talking about 3 million people. We've got a huge location with Richmond and Hampton Roads together. Go to this website, RVA757 Connects. And that's when they got really excited and said, this is really amazing what y'all have built, and maybe this could work. And so we really started thinking about it, and we looked at their mileage of any one of their markets, their catchment area, and it's 120 miles. And so I immediately said, okay, well, Henrico to Virginia Beach, that's about 120 miles. So maybe this could really work for us. And we've certainly got the population size. So we've had multiple calls, Bernard and Brian and myself, and put together a deck, and we shared the deck with probably about 10 different companies. Said, is this anything you'd be interested in? And the feedback was incredibly positive. Yes, get these guys to town. Let's hear their pitch. This has great potential for us. So when we think about this fundamental question, if we could get this going, it could become the soul of the global internet hub plan. That we not only advance the global internet hub for our mega region, but we end the digital divide at the same time, getting everybody excited and behind this. So the need is there. There are 400,000 people in poverty in our mega region, and 41%, according to Pew, don't have computers of that group and can't afford one, don't know how to set one up, don't know how to use it. So this is a need. And the next step is to have a meeting in Richmond and in Williamsburg and Hampton Roads with business leaders. Let the guys from PCs for People pitch, and then maybe introduce them to some of the foundations that we know that like to invest in this kind of thing, and see what can happen. So I'm going to open it up for discussion, but I want to start with Nico. You know these people. I'll put you on the spot, and then Brian Anderson and Bernard, y'all have been on calls. So just share with this group maybe what this could be.
Sure. Thanks, John. So Cox, we work with PCs for People to help advance affordable internet services. One of the things that we realized even pre-pandemic is to spur education and competitiveness in America. We needed to do two things. One, make sure that technology was in everybody's hands, right? Make sure people had access to the internet. So some will call it accessibility, and then also make sure people are able to adopt the benefits of the internet. And that's where digital literacy comes in. And so at Cox, what we do is when we offer subsidized internet services to less privileged families or seniors or veterans, et cetera, we partner with PCs for People to provide the equipment. Because we realize, especially for those who are first-time adopters, you might not have a PC, you might not have a laptop, you might not have a device. And so these folks have been one of our great partners. They were definitely absolutely outstanding during the pandemic in ensuring several communities, including communities here in Hampton Roads, especially children, had laptops to support distance learning. And so I think being able to, again, have that sort of facility here in the Richmond-Hampton corridor, where we already know that there are at least 250,000 households today that do not have internet access. And so we can assume that they might also not be digitally literate. I think having a partner like this in place would be terrific.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
That's great.
The only, hi, this is Bernard Robinson. The only question that we kept asking each other was, why aren't we doing this now? Why not Richmond? And we just could not come up with a good answer. The other thing is, what seemed to make this all work was a training component, because you could provide technology to people and it will sit there on a desk and look back at them. But the fact that this is all encompassed with training the people on how to use the technology just made all the sense in the world. We could actually implement what we're talking about.
Yeah. Thanks, Bernard.
I'll just add 2 things. Bernard's been a great champion, and Nika, thank you for that testimonial. I think you're right. It almost sounds too good to be true. So the 2 things that got me back, keep making me come back to why aren't we doing this, is one, the economic mobility piece. We're not gonna move families up economically unless we give them all the tools. And when they can demonstrate not just that they're doing it, but they're tracking it and showing how it does impact their household income over time, that was impressive to us. And the last one would be, to me, it's a pretty low lift to start. There's already a site in Baltimore, so we can start with Baltimore facility doing some of the work, meaning they could pick up from us, take it to the Baltimore facility, start bringing refurbed equipment down here, and start helping families while we build the larger infrastructure. So it's like every time I look for a gap or why we can't do this, we kind of had a solvable moment. So again, I highly encourage us all to think about this strongly, get the meeting set, just get companies to sign on and start, because I think it'll prove itself very quickly.
Yep.
And Brian, to buttress your point, we did a study because at first we thought, okay, we want to be sure we're not just, in happy-go land. What are the tangible benefits that we're seeing from partnerships like these in general? I'll put a link to that study, but the study basically unpacks the benefits, especially in rural areas, to people having internet access and being digitally literate.
Yeah.
And especially if you think about AI, somebody mentioned, I think, John, you mentioned AI, right? Artificial intelligence is going to spur productivity. If you start to think about talent of the future, the talent of 2034, 2040, these skills are all digitally rooted. And so to the extent we can be sure that all the folks in our RVA757 are digitally armed and literate, that's going to be a game changer. I'll put a link to the study in the chat.
Great. Well, listen, we're going to set up a meeting date that you'll see, and we want to do it in person. The guys are really excited. They've said they've never gone to a market where they have an introduction to all the people that are the big players and run it. They're like, this usually takes us 3 years. So they're excited about the relationship. And I want to be crystal clear. We have a lot to do as RVA757 Connects. This is simply an introduction and just sort of convening the first meeting. we are not going to fundraise for them. We're not going to be in there refurbishing computers. We're going to be focused on all the things we talked about earlier, our 5 core areas. This is a little cousin to the Global Internet Hub, but I just want you to know that we're not going to be asking for money. We're going to stay focused on our 5. So hope that's crystal clear. All right. Okay, back to sharing screen. We're now on to our featured content for today to really talk about legislative matters. And we are just so fortunate to have Ross and Chris and Bob to be board members of our group. But I need to spend a second telling you guys how incredibly helpful Ross and Chris are running our government relations program. They call me back immediately when I reach out, and they help look at all of our letters, and they help figure out our next steps. They are doing all of this work gratis, and just incredible professionals, and just are really part of our secret sauce and being able to do a lot with a really small staff. So Ross and Chris, thank you so much. And then I'll also say that Bob has been one of our intellectual pillars on a lot of the work and some of the research you just saw, and helping us write the plan, our initial plan, as well as the Global Internet Hub, and being a big leader there and helping to orchestrate those 2 studies that you saw that we did with the Jobs EQ and Lightcast data. Bob was right there as one of the champions overseeing it. So this is like my all-star team right here. So I really can't thank you guys enough, and what you guys do. And I think everybody knows you. We've divided up this next hour. I think Ross, you're going to kick it off and give some background, and then Chris is going to talk about government relations in terms of economic development, and then Bob's going to come and really talk about the General Assembly and where it is today and where it's headed and sort of what the culture is. And I think we're going to leave an hour from now much smarter about the General Assembly, but about how we need to proceed in getting our priorities through the General Assembly. So Ross, take it over.
Actually, John, Ross is on his way back to his office, so I think we're going to need to shift gears. He just thinks he should be able to log in here in a few moments, but if we can go to Chris,
sure,
that would be great.
All right. Chris, I'll go to your slides. They're not that many. All right. All right.
Sure. No, thanks. Appreciate the chance to be with y'all, and I may come back in and say some things depending on what Ross, because ours was to build on each other. So, and John already gave an update on some of the data center stuff, and I know Ross is going to talk about that. So I'm going to run through kind of where we stand here in the General Assembly. We're 2/3 of the way through. Review where we are on a number of initiatives with regards to legislation impacting economic development as it relates to priorities of this group, and then budget items as well. So John, go ahead. So there are only really a few bills that are that relevant for economic development. These are the ones that are advancing. The first 2 relate to implementing the JLARC recommendations regarding Go Virginia. For those of you who are aware, Go Virginia went through a year-long examination by the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, which was generally very laudatory of the Go Virginia program. In fact, whenever you get a JLARC report that says you're not spending your money fast enough, that's a good day. So there were a couple of changes to the Go Virginia statute that we needed to implement. One was to reduce the match, which was a JLARC recommendation to get the money out the door faster for Go Virginia. And then it was to add the Secretary of Labor to the board, because the Secretary of Labor did not exist at the time of Go Virginia's creation. So that is in Delegate Austin's bill. Senator Carol Foy has in the similar provisions in her bill, but it also includes her bill also includes a provision which expands what's something known as the Virginia Investment Partnership Program, which is an incentive program that the Virginia Economic Development Partnership has. It is one of the few incentive programs that Virginia offers for increased investment in capital. and not necessarily tied to job creation. Most of Virginia's incentives are tied to job creation. But this incentive was created back in 1999. It rewards companies for investing in capital, which is increasingly important to build on some of the comments that John made earlier about how we're moving towards a more capital-intensive economy. And Virginia actually enjoys some strategic advantages by having this incentive. The General Assembly put some limits around how many grants you could have outstanding at one time, and so this bill extends it. There was an initiative which was started last year, but it didn't really take off. But this year is, and that's House Bill 1125, Senate Bill 217, which is the Virginia Business Ready Sites Expedited Permitting Program. So that allows, I think we're all running into a number of challenges around the state with large industrial projects. I think many of you in Hampton Roads have seen it, whether it's the Coastal Virginia campus, whether it's the project in Suffolk along 460. You've seen a lot of opposition to those projects. We've seen some of it with Upper Magnolia here in the Richmond area. People are now challenging some of the data center development out at White Oak. But this would create a process where VEDP could designate certain critical sites and move that there would be essentially a shot clock that would be set, that permits would have to be granted within a certain number of days to speed those along. So the General Assembly has put a few more guardrails around that limit the number of projects that can move through this at any one time, but it's a good step forward, and hopefully will keep Virginia in the forefront of getting projects through the process faster, because speed to market is becoming an increasingly important factor in site selection and economic development decision-making. Next, many of you are familiar with the Virginia Business Ready Sites program. That's the program started about 10 years ago, but really wasn't well funded until Governor Northam put about $150 million in that program. Governor Youngkin has tried to put more money into it, and I'll get back to that later with regards to where we stand on the money. But the criteria for participating in that program said that you had to have a site of 100 acres in order to participate. Well, there's a number of jurisdictions around this combined region where getting a 100-acre site is virtually impossible. And so there's legislation that's now moving forward that would reduce the threshold to 50 acres if you meet certain criteria, that essentially there's geographic challenges or wetlands or others, or there's a special economic opportunity. So if you're in that program, then you can tap into that $150 million fund that I spoke of earlier. So that's a good piece of legislation that's moving forward. House Bill 61 and Senate Bill 679 are bills to extend the life of certain enterprise zones around the state. Enterprise zones are limited to a 10 or 20-year life, depending on when they were created. And some of those enterprise zones are getting ready to expire. So this would continue to move those forward. We probably need to undertake a pretty significant overhaul of Virginia's enterprise zone program anyway. It was designed in 95. And the amount of money that's available through the enterprise zone program is in still $1,995, and $100,000 doesn't go very far like it did in 1995. So you're going to probably see some more changes to the enterprise zone program next year, but this at least makes sure that communities that have enterprise zones already don't lose them. The last bill is the arena bill. And I think anybody who has is breathing kind of knows what's going on with regards to the arena discussion in Northern Virginia right now. There's only the one bill that is alive. The Senate decided not to act on the bill that was there. So this is the bill that would allow for the Caps Wizards arena to move forward in Northern Virginia. It's now in the Senate. It faces a great significant headwinds. Yesterday, as you may have seen, that the AFL-CIO and a number of the trade unions in Northern Virginia came out against the project. And so this will be one of the last bills that's decided if anything happens at all this session. Next slide, John. There are a couple of economic development bills or ones that were challenging for economic development that fortunately have been defeated. Y'all may recall last year there was legislation that the governor championed that would have restricted the ownership of agricultural land by companies that are listed, or countries or companies that are part of foreign adversaries. There was legislation this year to take that even further, that instead of just agricultural land, it would have restricted ownership of any land by any citizen of a foreign adversary in Virginia. So if you were a Syrian refugee or a legitimate Chinese business person, you would not only be prohibited from buying land, but the state would make you sell your land in a year. That's just a horrible, terrible signal to send to the economic development community. Similar legislation passed in Florida. It's now tied up in the court system. Thankfully, that bill was defeated. And I don't say that because, I want the People's Liberation Army to come in and take over the port or something like that. But just the signal that sent would have sent would be very bad. There was legislation that the governor championed. I think many of you know that sports tourism is a growing economic sector in the state. The Virginia Tourism Corporation has put some money that they had from the ARPA monies into sports tourism, got a really good return out of that. The governor was going to put more money into sports tourism, but instead decided to take an existing fund, the Governor's Motion Picture Opportunity Fund, and broaden the eligibility criteria for that to include sports tourism. This is just not the year to do that, because all the oxygen in the room that relating to sports and sports tourism is being sucked up by the arena issue. And then, as you see here, the Senate version of the Virginia Sports and Entertainment Authority, as I talked about earlier, has been defeated. Next, John. So let's talk about what's going on in the economic development budget side. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'll talk about economic development budget. It was, the governor put forward his budget, proposed budget for the coming biennium. He did that on December 20th, and he had a number of items in there for economic development. He did actually cut some funding for economic development in that proposed budget. Many of you are aware that he decided to take $28 million of the unappropriated balances for Go Virginia, which was a pretty big shock to many people that the governor did that. He swept $60 million away from the Tobacco Commission, which is unprecedented. That money has been kind of sacred since it was created 25 years ago out of the Master Settlement Agreement. Neither of those were restored in the budget amendments. And then the General Assembly just took just about everything else the governor had proposed with regards to economic development. So the governor wanted to build on last year's and Governor Northam's money that he put into the Business Ready Sites program. He put in almost $200 million more for site development and acquisition. The House reduced that by another 120, took 123 million of that, and the Senate took 123 million of that. The House took 160 million of it. That's just not good for Virginia, particularly when you see some of our neighboring states ramping up even further what they're putting into site development. South Carolina's budget includes another couple $100 million. Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania just announced a $500 million bond package for site development, and instead we are now taking away money for site development. The governor had proposed, and Nancy, you're certainly aware of this, Nancy Gurdon, this talent attraction marketing program. You're seeing other states, Michigan, Indiana, really out there trying to leverage, build off their tourism messaging to attract people to Virginia. The governor had an initiative for $15 million. The House and the Senate both zeroed out that program entirely. VDP, as many of you are aware, has been trying to undertake an overhaul of its marketing program in something called the Innovative Framework. They had a few $1 million for implementing that. Most of that money was taken away in both the House and the Senate budget amendments. I already talked about the sweep of the money for Go Virginia. The governor had money in his budget for not only tied specifically to the 250th anniversary celebration, but then another that was $20 million, but then $35 million to invest in a number of the historical attractions that will see increased visitation because of the anniversary celebration. The Senate zeroed that out completely. The House reduced it by $15 million. The governor also wanted to put more money into something called the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund, which is actually a piece of legislation I wrote in 2005, which is one of the few tools that Virginia has to go outside the normal transportation system, the scoring smart scale system, and put money into transportation projects that have an economic development nexus. That fund has been particularly useful for the development of a lot of the assets at the spaceport out on the Eastern Shore and other places. The governor wanted to put more money into that. That was reduced. The General Assembly did put more money into the VATI program, which, as you may know, was the state program to support broadband deployment. The governor wanted to eliminate the state funding for that program, and just rely on federal funds, which is the BEAD money. But there are a lot of communities in Virginia that aren't eligible for the federal money, but we're drawing down the state resources. So that was a priority that did get restored. So it will allow some more broadband money to be spent. Next slide, John. So that really, one other thing on the budget, since John brought up earlier the boat trail, there was a budget amendment to move the Trails Office from VDOT to the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which is probably a good move for everybody. It's clear that VDOT sees that, and particularly the current secretary, and this is nothing against the current secretary, I don't mean my comments that way, it's not a priority for him, whereas I think DCR might be a much better steward for it. I think we would want to make sure that going to John's comments earlier, that it's not just seen as a conservation or recreation thing, but also, maybe having VEDP or economic development entities at the table if that move takes place. But then again, to put this all into context, this was not a year for economic development. Where the money went was into K-12 education, into teacher salary increases, to increase the minimum wage, and other democratic priorities. And economic development fell by the wayside. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, why don't we hold our questions to the end and move on? Ross, are you here now?
I am here. Apologies for my delay.
No problem. I'm going to go back to your slides and you can give us the perspective on sort of
Been a monumental morning, as Chris alluded to.
Yes, yes. Okay. So take it away.
So I think you all may remember, I think it was Convergence 2 years ago now, where we sort of first took a look at really what the influence of each region separately meant and what the sort of benefit was of working together from just a legislative perspective. And so now that we've had an intervening election and a pretty significant one, we thought we'd take a look at those numbers again and see how we stand up to where we were. So first we took a look at Richmond, and so the legislative numbers overall don't really change a whole lot across the mega region. There were a lot more districts that I would sort of say overlapped between Hampton Roads and Richmond, but now with these more compact districts, there's really only 1 or 2 members that could theoretically fall into both buckets. The big one being Ryan McDougall. His district goes from Hanover down into James City County. But you'll still see we've got a couple committee chairs, a couple subcommittee chairs. We don't know who budget conferees are yet, so those numbers aren't in there. Still decent number of appropriators, and then 1 real leadership position. So then we looked at the Hampton Roads numbers, and those are a bit higher than the Richmond region. There's a few more legislators. Obviously, you've got the speaker, you've got Louise Lucas, the finance chair and president pro tem, and a few more subcommittee chairs, a few more committee chairs. And so when you put those numbers together, they're pretty significant. I know you're talking almost half of the committee chairs are within the mega region. A significant number of subcommittee chairs, almost, not quite half of the appropriators, about a third of the appropriators, and then, a good number of the leadership positions. And so when you compare that to, that's where we are now, when you compare that to where we were 2 years ago, it seems like we're in a good place, but things have actually, the numbers have decreased slightly. And I think, that is not something to be a huge cause of concern. I think it's just sort of the nature of where we are just in this legislative cycle. We lost some giants on a legislative front, from retirements and, lost elections. There's some, political gamesmanship, Barry Knight no longer being on appropriations. But still, we have a pretty significant amount of legislative clout in the region that we should, and can take advantage of when we're working together. So with that being said, thought we'd talk a little bit about how we put together our agenda and how we really use what's been put together by the Mike and all of the organizations that we partner with to get us here. And so Chris and I do our best to reach out to all of the existing regional organizations to hear what those priorities are. And so rather than looking at each individual locality's legislative agenda, we try to take some of the regional agendas and see where priorities align. And it's pretty remarkable, especially looking at the chamber agendas, just how many similarities there are. They're not identical, but they're pretty close. And that really makes it easy for us to determine what should be, the agenda, for RVA 757. And so we take sort of those Mike agendas, and then we sort of distill them down to what are the ones that are really focused on, economic development, mega region priorities, and then put together our sort of legislative agenda. And that's sort of what outlines the work and the priorities that we've been focused on, and where we ask, John and Greg and you all to weigh in on issues. And so looking at this year's agenda, you can see there's a couple very sort of specific items, but also some good broad items that we should be working on. So obviously the specific ones, Jefferson Lab, Capitol Trail, those are really key to this mega region. But then the bigger, broader ones, site readiness, workforce, rail connectivity, early childhood, transportation, all the above energy, healthcare, all those are good things for just economic development generally, and not necessarily specific to our region, but stuff that is important for us to be supporting and helpful on. And there's a couple of examples about how we've gotten involved doing that. And so Chris and I do our best to monitor and keep an eye on any landmines that come up that align with those priorities. And when we do, we try to keep folks informed and come up with a plan on how we should get involved. And so I think there's two really good examples from this session where we've gotten involved. And so the first one
Russ, I
is
want to add real quickly here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make sure everybody knows we have our 5 priorities. We are not, Greg nor myself, we do not spend time on the Hill running around, shaking hands and trying to advance all these. We are standing by for Chris and Ross to say, hey, here's a point that we really need the air cover. Engage with a letter or something. But I just want y'all to understand that you're listening to the 2 folks that are the tip of our spear, but we are not actively up there every day. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands. So go ahead.
Well, and with one exception, I think you talked about that earlier. We learned about a presentation that was being set up to the House CTI committee, and jumped on the opportunity, and John showed up and made a few remarks before the committee. So I think that was a great opportunity to take advantage of, and I'm glad it worked out. So really back to the sort of 2 examples of challenging where we've gotten involved. Obviously the data center issue is a very hot button one, in particular with some Northern Virginia legislators. And we distributed both our map as well as a letter to the General Assembly members, just saying let's not be brash about how we respond to these issues. Let's take a thoughtful approach. And I think Chris sort of already touched on it. I think 95% of the legislation that would have had a very detrimental impact to the data center industry, not just in Northern Virginia, but across the Commonwealth, has been put on hold because there's an ongoing JLARC study, which is exactly the sort of thoughtful approach that we suggested the legislature take. And so they are taking that thoughtful approach. And so it just means that when that report comes out, we're going to need to be that much more involved in paying attention to what those recommendations are, and how we can be helpful in implementing the ones that are good ideas, and perhaps suggesting why some of the not so good recommendations are bad ideas. And so I think, our ability to, have this information put together already. I mean, I think this map does a great job of illustrating the strengths of the mega region, but also the opportunities that we can, see moving forward. And, John and Greg did a great job getting this letter out to all 140 quickly. Next is the Go Virginia funding. And as we are obviously a beneficiary of that funding, and continued support for Go Virginia is important to our success. And so while we did send letters to key members of the appropriations and finance committees, as Chris just mentioned, that was funding that they ended up sweeping. And I don't I don't think that is a reflection. I don't think that's a reflection on us. And, he also mentioned the Tobacco Commission sort of unprecedented sweeping of that funds. Those funds, we have a resource problem this year. Their forecast is expecting a gentle downtick in Q3 of this year, and they are hurting for every dollar they can find. And so if there are dollars out there, they will sweep every dollar they can. And I think the House was a bit more strategic in how they did it. I think the Senate, literally, it seems like they're penny pinching. One of the items that we discovered late yesterday in reading through the budget amendments, the Senate swept. There was an extra $500,000 that goes to Jefferson Lab for grants to colleges to help with research, and the Senate swept that $500,000 each year because they were trying to collect as much money as they could. Quite frankly, to fund Senator Lucas' toll relief package for Portsmouth. So, I think there's still opportunity for these conversations moving forward, but I do think that we have been able to have a thoughtful impact on how we've moved forward with these items. So, with that, I'm happy to pause, and Chris and I can answer any questions, or John, if you want to turn it over to Bob first, up to you.
Yeah, I think Bob says it's like 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for a 20-minute discussion. Okay. So Bob, why don't we start? Bob Holsworth. Well,
He's muted, so he may not be realizing that. Libby, can you go on ahead and unmute him?
I'm happy to start to touch on this a little bit while we figure out if Bob's there. I think in full disclosure, I am on the team working on the monumental deal, and I know that not everyone here cares about an arena in Alexandria, but I do think it is the undercurrent by which the General Assembly and the governor's office need to figure out how to work more together under this new environment. And we're off to a pretty rocky start on that front. I think stuff that, historically was not political has become political. I do think I give a lot of credit to Speaker Scott. I think he has it figured out and is being strategic and doing what he can to work, with the governor. They obviously, I think they have a relationship that, there's some push pull there, but I do think he is doing his best to be thoughtful and understand that he's not going to get everything he wants, but the governor is also not going to get everything he wants. And so how can the two of them work together to find a compromise? I do think the sort of X factor in this entire conversation is Senator Lucas. And, obviously she's in our region, and, some of the priorities she's working on are exciting and helpful to the region. But I think she is a little more unpredictable, I think, than other folks in leadership and in that seat. And so, I think they very quickly need to figure out how they're going to work together with all this, because there's all kinds of rumors that they're going to go to a special session because they're not going to be able to finish a budget, which, if you're the Democrats, you've just taken over, and Speaker Scott's priority has been we need the trains to run on time, and his leadership team, and I give him a lot of credit, they've done an incredible job. They adjourned on crossover at 1:30, and for those of you not in the weeds on this, crossover day is typically a 8-hour marathon, and they were on the floor for just shy of 4 hours, which is unheard of. But it goes to the immense effort that they've put on making the trains run on time. And so I know that it's a big priority of theirs to finish on time, because it shows that, they know how to govern. And so if they're locked in a dead heat battle with the Senate leadership, it is not going to look good politically that they're going to budget overtime because they can't figure out things within the Democratic Party. You may remember a number of years ago when the Republicans had taken back over, they tried to finish a day early. They wanted to show they were so efficient at running government they could finish early. And while they were done, they realized if they finished a day early, they were going to drop a whole lot of bills on the governor's desk unintentionally. And so I think they technically finished on Saturday, but all the voting was really done on Friday. So, Chris, I don't know if you've got anything to add or if we've heard from Bob yet, but I do think that I think things will be a little bit bumpier before they smooth out.
Yeah, I agree. And, every session this week, we all say, oh, we're going to go into overtime. And I think for all the reasons Ross outlined, I think there's going to be a lot of desire to finish up on time. That doesn't mean that the discussion with regards to issues, high profile issues like the arena and others won't go further because, of course, the session ends and then the governor has the right to suggest amendments. And I think there will be a long ongoing dialogue on that and other issues.
Okay, John, I think
Welcome, Bob.
okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I just couldn't unmute for a long time. I had to change to my phone.
Bob, you might need to mute your computer. We're getting a bad echo.
Yeah, let me turn it off. Okay, John, is this better? No, it's still bad. 2 more seconds.
Well, Bob's working on that. I do.
Yeah,
feel-
is this working now?
Yes.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk and tell me if it doesn't work at all, okay?
You sound great. Proceed.
Okay, so let me try to take us back a little bit to try to give a little framework for what we're seeing and what we may see going forward. So first, I just want to talk about very briefly the election that occurred in November. And the election had a couple of major issues involved in terms of what the outcome would mean. And the first one was whether or not Virginia was going to have divided government. What the governor wanted to do was to keep the House and flip the Senate so that at the end so for this session, what he might have would be a legislature that would look very much like the last 2 years of the Northam administration, where the Democrats were able to put in legislation that had been pent up for a generation when they had a majority in both houses and the governorship for the first time since the 1990s. And then secondly, if he didn't get this, if the governor wasn't successful, what kind of divided government would we have? And then thirdly, because there were so many new legislators as a result of the redistricting, what would be the makeup and priorities of the General Assembly members? And I think we want to know the answer to those questions to tell us a little bit about how to move RVA757 Connects going forward. So what happened, of course, was that we wound up, in terms of the first question, still having divided government. We had a governor of one party and we had the General Assembly, both houses controlled by the other party. Having divided government in Virginia is not a new thing or an unusual thing. In fact, unified government is far more unusual than divided government. That for the past 20 years, with the exception of 2 years in the McDonald administration and the last 2 years of the Northern administration, That's what we've had. We've had a governor of one party, and we've had a legislature controlled by the other party. And in fact, even with that situation, Virginia has been able to do a significant amount of big things and innovative things at times. George Allen was able to get the SOLs passed. Mark Warner was able to get a tax increase passed in order to stabilize the Virginia economy. Bob McDonnell was able to get a bipartisan coalition on transportation. And Ralph Northam was able to do Medicaid expansion. So Virginia's done some big things with divided government there. But that takes a lot of political skill and a lot of effort to get those things done. So typically when we have divided government, there are a range of issues on which both the governor and the General Assembly agree. At the moment, I think there are three areas that are particularly important this session. One is clearly workforce. I think there's a large coalition around this, whether it be, as Peggy said earlier, about community colleges and what they could do, or whether we should have more programs to increase the capacity of individuals to gain skills. That's something that unites Republicans and Democrats. If you go out to the far Southwest, workforce is absolutely critical issue. And then if you look at somebody like Louise Lucas, the Senate Finance Committee chair, she was the first woman to go through the Norfolk Naval Academy shipbuilding program, was the first woman ship fitter in the Commonwealth. And so that workforce place is a place where they often agree. This time, I think we've also seen agreement on some childcare efforts, and that's changed over time. When they first came out as childcare, that was seen as a liberal thing. But over the years, the business community has endorsed it as a way of promoting workforce development, and in particular, in recent years, as a way of ensuring that women might be more interested in joining the workforce there, as well as re-entering the workforce. Thirdly, certainly behavioral health and mental health is an area where Virginia has really tried to make some significant progress, dealing particularly with the issues of access to crisis care for people. And that's a place where Democrats and Republicans are fairly well united. In the past, there's been, I think, more agreement on basic economic development measures, and that'll go in part to my next point. But at one point, we had a number of very clear, strong pro-business Democrats, especially in Northern Virginia, and they were able to align with Republicans on a lot of economic development issues. And this time we've seen something a little bit different in the Assembly. As Chris said, it has not been a great year for that kind of funding. So secondly, as we said, we have divided government, and now, but we have a particular kind of divided government that's occurred. That one of the things that has changed since 2000, since the first 2 years of the Northam administration, is that at that point we had a Republican House and we had a Democratic Senate. Right now we don't have that. We have a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. And what's interesting is that it tells us a little bit about the consequences of elections, that these margins that the Democrats have are razor thin, 51-49 in the House, 21-19 in the Senate, but it has a significant impact. One impact is, like, prior to this year, we had a Republican budget coming out of the House, a Democratic budget coming out of the Senate. And so there was a negotiation that occurred between the Democrats and the Republicans prior to sending something to the governor. Right now, that's not the case. It's a negotiation among Democrats in the House and the Senate. There will be Republican members of the conference committee, but they won't have much influence. It's the Democrats who have basically shaped the priorities here. And so that's a big difference. And just let me talk a little bit about what that means as well. It means that most of the legislation that's passed now has been passed with Democratic priorities. As Chris said, their major priority has been funding K-12 education. There was a JLARC report that said Virginia was billions underfunded, and the Democrats have made that their primary issue. Secondly, what you also see among the Democrats is that you see more influence from labor than you would have seen if the Republicans controlled the legislature. So you see issues about minimum wage, you see issues about unemployment compensation that are passed from a Democratic perspective. And one of the things I mentioned there is that the Virginia Chamber rates every year legislators as their sort of pro-business policies and pro-business votes. And last year, prior to the election in the Senate, there were 4 or 5 Democratic legislators who received an A from the chamber. Right now, there's only 1 legislator who received an A last year from the chamber. And in the House, there are no Democratic legislators who received an A from the chamber on that front. And indeed, one of the first things they do in the House when they Democrats gain the majority is they change the name of the committee that had been under Republicans, Commerce and Energy, become under the Democrats, Labor and Commerce there. So you have a significant sort of shift in terms of the perspective. And so that's why you see the agenda that's come out of the Democrats, which are K-12, minimum wage, criminal justice reforms, maintaining their reforms that they made last time on voting rights. And the first thing they did was that they also basically took the governor's tax cut proposals or tax reform proposals in which he wanted to reduce the income tax and increase the sales tax. And the Democrats just said that was a non-starter and a no-brainer. So what that tells us a little bit is that there's just these very differing perspectives from the governor and oftentimes the business community and some of the Democratic legislators about priorities. And so let me just talk very briefly about that before I end. If you listen to the governor, and in fact, if you listen to John Martin a little earlier, their perspective tends to look at this sort of broad competitive nature of Virginia versus other states. The governor says, well, I want to reduce that income tax because we have these neighboring states that either don't have an income tax like Tennessee or have a lower income tax than Virginia. And that this can be a problem, attracting business, maintaining competitiveness with the states with which we try to compete for job relocations and talent on that front. John said it earlier before, where he talked about the digital workforce in Virginia and the growth compared to the digital workforce in other states. And I think when one looks at the General Assembly, however, particularly the Democrats, that's not their top priority right now, that they don't see the world necessarily that way. They see the world in terms of how do you promote people's skills by K-12 education? How do you deal with wage gaps by increasing minimum wage? How do you enhance the earned income tax credit? So if you look at the priorities that people have when they get elected, this is what their priorities are. And it's not to say that they're wrong in any way. It's just to say that those priorities reflect their background, their experience, their sense of what their constituents need. So as RVA757 goes forward and thinks about working with the Assembly, you have to think about this. How does RVA757 interact with the priorities that folks have, or how do we begin that conversation with various groups? I looked, for example, at the agenda of the Legislative Black Caucus, which is far more powerful than it's ever been in Virginia, and is going to remain quite a factor. And what you would consider traditional economic development perspective that would come out of the governor or the business community, not necessarily included. But at the same time, there has to be great opportunity there. There was a study yesterday that came out that said in the city of Richmond, or in Richmond, there were more Black businesses created last year in a percentage basis than any other city but Milwaukee in that front, in the country. We were second in the country. So there has to be some sense of how does RVA 757 interact with sort of members of the assembly, particularly the new power structure in the assembly, to assure that we can be on the same page going forward. I think PCs for People is one good opportunity there, but there are others. And the other point I would just mention here for RVA 757, with all these new members of the assembly, it's very, there's a lot of people who have no idea what RVA 757 is on that front. And there should be some kind of educational opportunity. Invite them to the meetings, to Convergence, to really speak about that and to begin that conversation to make sure that we're all on the same page going forward. So that's kind of my sense. I think next year is going to be a very tough year in the assembly because it's an election year, and we are going to see a lot of the kind of posturing that occurs. But I do think there are ways to show folks what RVA 757 has accomplished, to begin to ensure that the new General Assembly members understand the opportunity that is provided by this coalition that we've built, and that we can move forward under any divided government or non-divided government. That shouldn't prevent us from having a lot of progress.
That's fantastic, Bob. Thank you so much. So why don't we got 12 minutes left. Why don't we open it up to questions to Ross and Chris and Bob. I think Chris is coming back. He had to jump off for a quick call, but let's just open it up. Anybody, please address a question to one of these gentlemen.
John, this is not a question. It's kind of an observation that part of our basic ethos is collaboration, and this non-reversionary funding removal from Go Virginia is kind of a step backwards in a very significant way. It takes a lot longer, and I think everybody on this call knows it takes a lot longer to get people to collaborate and cooperate, and you just can't do that within the funding cycle of the annual budget. So to remove that non-reversionary provision was a big part of the Go Virginia secret sauce, so to speak, and we just need to recognize that.
Okay.
And I'd just like to say that, the collaboration between both communities, a group is just fantastic. It really adds so much to have this collaboration and working together like this. But John, is there anything, or Bob, is there that we should be supporting? I mean, I know we maybe, to get the I-64 expansion, we're a powerful group working together. Is there anything that we should be doing to help some of this legislation that we see that is a positive for RVA 757 or the state of Virginia? Should we be talking to legislators as a group, or to be supporting some of these issues?
I might let Ross go first on that.
On that.
Yeah, I think I think part of the challenge we're having is, I think, sort of as Bob outlined, there's just been such significant turnover, and not that the new leadership isn't aware of us and the stuff that we've done. I just think they are all still trying to get comfortable in their new seats and figure out the strength and stretch of their power. And so I think part of the challenge we have is, well, yes, I agree that, this Go Virginia change is a concern and is a problem. I don't think it's this existential threat. And so I feel like if there was something that was really an existential threat, that would be worth rolling up our sleeves and spending our political capital on it. But I don't think, and Chris or Bob or anyone else may disagree with me. Of all the stuff we've seen, I don't think any of it is this existential threat that we really need to dive in at this stage. I do think that we need to, and because we've been doing this, but now that we know who the new leadership is, take advantage of this interim to really educate, the new leaders on the value proposition that is RVA757 Connects, and what we've done and what we're planning to work on moving forward, and more importantly, how that might align with some of their priorities.
Okay.
And this is Ted, if I could just to Ross, to any of y'all really. We were quite successful working with the budget conferees tactically on the I-64 gap. And so on things like this grab of the Go Virginia money, and is there going to be an opportunity for us to educate/advocate for that to be restored in conference? Or are we going to stand down? Tactically, what can we do where we see something like that that is so negative to what came before?
I mean, I think we weigh in with the conferees once we know who they are. I still think we do that. And I mean, if folks feel like it is that important, let's weigh in. The organization can send a letter, and then, as we've done in the past, we can encourage everyone who has a relationship with one of those conferees to reach out directly and say how important it is.
Okay, so that tactic is available to us. So that's one thing I think we should consider. I mean, some of this seems almost like education. You've got these new legislators, they may not really appreciate what they've done with some of these steps. So anyway, that's just the thought of how we might react when it's time. And I just raised that. I hate to just sit on our hands and see these kind of results occur without us taking the approach that we've taken historically, which is a research-based, future-focused, rational, collaborative conversation with the decision makers. And then, of course, we live with the decision.
Well, the one thing I would add, Ted, is and Peggy, I see you got your hand up. So sorry, let me just add here that I think since this organization was created, we have benefited from very good financial situations in the Commonwealth. We have not been through a true shortfall or, 10% cuts across the board, like I saw when I first started doing budget work, 15 years ago. And so we have benefited from that because there's always been money. And so there's been plenty of money to do everything. And I think what we are seeing now is you have a new majority, new people in power that have different priorities, and they are spending what is now limited resources on their priorities. And I think if you ask them, it's not that they don't think Go Virginia is important. I think it's that they probably think that there's already a baseline appropriation for Go Virginia. We've already done a lot for Go Virginia. But these areas over here have been ignored for the last decade. And we feel like we need to spend some money over here to invest in those areas. And so we're not cutting your program. You still have money. We're just taking what we see as excess money that you all didn't spend, and we're going to spend it on these other priorities. That's what they're going to say. And that's the rub that we have. It'd be different if this was an all-out cut of Go Virginia. That is an existential threat. That is when we could go full bore at all the conferees. My concern is that when we go in there and say we want more for Go Virginia, they're saying, okay, well then we're not going to do as much as we were for early childhood, or those teacher raises that we've been trying to do to get our teacher salaries to the national average. We're not going to be able to do those. Like those are the priorities of this new majority that we're bumping up against.
Thanks.
That's great.
Peggy.
So in the community college case, the Senate gave zero money. The House gave us some money. And so listening to Bob's comment of the difference between a broad perspective and a narrow approach, are we talking in terms of wordsmithing some of the requests that, you know, for example, if upward mobility or wage gap, closing the wage gap is important, is it a matter of using the right words to describe something differently? I mean, you know, in our case, we use some economic development terminology. We used wage, you know, closing the wage gap and the skill gap. So is it wordsmithing or what?
I mean,
We're really,
it
community
certainly
college,
doesn't hurt.
we are really confused as to, number one, the governor gave $0 to the community colleges, and the Senate gave, and so, you know, we just need to, and maybe that's with the budget, the conferees, that we sort of wordsmith our approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think massaging the words certainly matters. It's not the whole story, but it's certainly part of it. I'll be honest, Peggy, I've not been following the legislature's thoughts on, I know what the staff, you know, we've heard what I've talked about before, what the staff thoughts are on the community college stuff. And I think honestly, you know, this is a year where those, you know, amendments are more driven by staff, because you've got so many new people, you know, people that not only are new to the legislature, but, you know, new to appropriations. And so I think they're relying on staff more so than they maybe have historically.
Okay. Ryan Anderson.
I'll make this quick, even though it could go on a lot longer. One, thank you, Ross and Chris, for all you all do. And Bob, your perspective is always very helpful. I'm still learning the Commonwealth compared to where I came from, but I know the South, our competitors, pretty well, and they are putting the gas pedal down. They're investing in workforce, they're investing in sites, investing in economic development, and we're not, period. And when I hear the governor talk and a few others, at least there's data backed up. Chancellor Dorr talks about data. And when you talk to the Democratic leadership, primarily, they don't back it up with data. It's more ideology. You need to do this. I mean, minimum wage, we chose not to take a firm position this year because in Richmond, $15 is not an issue. We're all paying $18, $20, $22 an hour. But when you look at agriculture and other sectors, whether it be retail or otherwise, they're going to be affected. And they're not, you know, and that's not going to hurt the businesses. They're going to pass the cost along. So this inflationary cycle just continues. So I would just sum up this whole conversation to me is that a lot of new leadership, a lot of new elected officials, elections have consequences, as Bob said. We got to let them make some mistakes. And unfortunately, we're going to pay. We're going to pay in rankings. We're going to pay in economic development project losses. And maybe between now and next year or the next couple of years, they'll figure out that you gotta benchmark your successes against others and then track that. But I see for the next 18 to 24 months, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina are going to continue because they're already at a cost of living advantage. They've made light speed advances in their education. You know, 20 years ago, you couldn't talk about, you know, education in Tennessee or Georgia, especially if you got outside of the bigger metropolitan areas. Now you can. There's great school systems throughout Georgia, South Carolina, and others. And we don't have that competitive advantage anymore. And every time I hear the community college numbers, I just want to cry because it's malpractice. That is the workforce development for any state, and we don't have that right now. Thank gosh we've got the quick service model that Mike Drummond and BDP have put together so strongly, but that's for new companies. It doesn't talk about the holistic approach that 3 million people Peggy speaks about so often. So I'm real nervous that we're going to have some success in some areas, but I believe we're going to see a loss of ranking in some respects. I mean, and we don't build cars here. Yep. Everybody south of us is now building cars. So I just think we got to be careful of that, and I'll quit my diatribe.
Okay,
Brian, I think what I would just very quickly sort of respond and say to that is, I think I am disappointed that we have a governor who's focused his last two budget proposals on taxes. And after last year's effort failed so gloriously in the legislature, I was hopeful that his team would have learned their lesson, that if they were going to try something large and remarkable, that they would have done the background and the homework with the members before they proposed something again. Or two, they would realize that that was sort of dead on arrival with the Democratic legislature, and instead focus their efforts, instead of giving away or giving back $1 billion or whatever the number is, they would focus their efforts on exactly what you just said, is like, if we've got this surplus money, instead of putting it into programs that just raise the base cost of operating government, let's find ways to make one-time investments. That's how sites got started. We had surplus funds that we invested in sites. What are big one-time investments that we can use those monies to help inflate our position when it comes to competing on a business front? And instead, they came out with another tax proposal and didn't talk to a soul. I mean, they briefed the Republican caucuses 24 hours before that budget came out, and that was the first any of them had heard of these tax proposals. They're just not going anywhere when you do stuff like that.
Yeah, I would concur with Ross, and it was kind of the point I was trying to make about when you get big things done, it takes a lot of political skill and a lot of background work. And that budget, that tax proposal was a proposal of somebody who had won the election, not somebody who had just lost the election to the Democrats. And I think we paid a little bit of a price for what was a inexperienced mistake, I think, on this part. And at the same time, we have that situation of really having to try to find a way to ensure that new legislators see economic development in this sort of broader context, broader competitive context than they're likely to do just from an initial campaign.
Okay. Well, Bob and Chris and Ross, thank you guys so much. Really incredible to have you as part of our think tank, and appreciate all the time you spent preparing for this. So let's close out. We've gone a couple of minutes over. Tom, do you want to share a few remarks and make a point about our next meetings?
Sure. Let's start with the next meetings, and great job, everybody who spoke today. It's very informative. These are our meetings for the year. All of them are virtual except for Convergence. This is a year particularly where Convergence, I think, needs to show an even bigger increase, which has been great the last couple of years. And this year, I think we can show a much bigger increase. That would be super. So these are the dates. As far as opportunities to build our momentum, which is the next slide, if you're not on the Global Internet Hub Council, please think about joining. This is all about jobs. This is all about talent. This is one thing that we absolutely couldn't do individually. We would look like South Carolina. We need to be together on this. We need to work together. And we have our universities and our community colleges working on talent development with new programs, new curricula, etc. So this is something that we can really make an impact on. As far as the new committees go, it's very disappointing to hear the results of this legislature and to see how our spending on site development, economic development, etc., is paling in relation to our competitors. The best way to improve that is one step at a time, one speaker at a time. So we need as many of you as possible on the Speakers Bureau. We need more than John Martin doing his eloquent, great job around the two regions speaking on this. So please sign up for the Communications Committee. Please get involved in speaking. The more people hear about what we're doing, the more that can happen and the more pressure that's going to be put on our legislators to do the right thing next year and the years coming. So let's not get overly down. Let's talk about how we can keep moving. And the next virtual innovation spotlight is perfect. It's accelerating innovation through tech transfers at universities. And we know William & Mary, we know ODU, VCU, and some of the community colleges are greatly expanding their curricula for computing and data sciences and analytics technology. And we've seen firsthand that this correlates to worker productivity and growth on a regional basis and helps us competitively. So even if we may not be getting the spending that we'd like to see this year and the year ahead, we can help our case. We can improve our competitiveness if we're teaching the right subjects and we're training the right talent and retaining more of the talent. And the more that people see about what we're doing and hear from our speakers, the better chance we're going to have to continue to improve. This PCs for People is great. What the community colleges are doing is great. Lastly, when you look at what we do, we convene people on the big four things: connectivity, collaboration, innovation, and growth. We took a shot on collaboration this year with the Go Virginia cuts. We took a shot with the community colleges not getting funding because they are at the base of each of our regions. Remember that economies are built from regions out, not from countries down, not from states down. And this organization basically takes the strengths of two great regions and turns them into a 1 + 1 = 3 opportunities by enhancing collaboration between the two regions and the organizations in these regions. So this to me is not a time to get down and to bemoan things. This is a time to stand up, and I'd like to see this organization speak even stronger in 2024 than it's spoken to this date, and to have a great number of you, all of whom are gifted speakers, speak more about what we're doing to the various constituencies. So thank you for your attendance. Great job, John and team. And we'll see you next quarter.
Okay, goodbye all. Thank you.